Hey guys, it's Bailey. Welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a dupe or dud. I am putting two contour palettes head to head. One is the IT Cosmetics My Sculpted Face palette, and the other is the ULTA Contour Kit. IT Cosmetics palette retails for $38, while the ULTA goes for $18. So if you could find a dupe between these two, you'd save 20 bucks. Also, in case you noticed, the background has changed once again. It's starting to feel a little bit normal, a little bit more like home. We finally moved in to our new apartment, and so things are still going to be changing a little bit in the background, but I was really eager to film, so I tidied this up. If you can see behind the camera, it's a royal mess. But I really wanted to get this video up, so let's dive in. First, I want to start with the IT Cosmetics palette. This retails, like I said, for $38. It's been out for quite some time. This is the first palette that I can really remember, the first contour palette that I can really remember coming out. I have a full video review of this, so I'm not going to go too in-depth. I'm going to give you the gloss over what it has, what I like about it, some of the shortcomings it might have, and then if you want to see a more in-depth, detailed review, and I think I do a demo in that video, you can go check that out. So right off the bat, you can see you have two highlight shades. One is a matte white shade. It comes off very translucent on the cheeks. When I first got this, I didn't really know how to use it. It was kind of a setting powder, but it would be too light for some skin tones because even though it's translucent for the most part, you do kind of get a white cast. But since then, my sister actually gave me this tip. She likes to use it in between where her contour goes and her jawbone, because sometimes that can get a little muddied. So if you find that's the case, dip your brush into this guy and just run it right in between there. It'll brighten it up and really take away a little bit of that harsh pigmentation or muddiness that you might encounter as you're using these other contour shades. Then there is what is one of my most favorite powder highlights ever, and to my knowledge you can only find it in this palette. That's not like they make it individually, and it's this gorgeous pink pearlescent highlight. I am wearing it on the right side of my face, on the tops of my cheekbones. I actually did one side IT and one side ULTA to really prove whether or not you can create identical looking looks with the two, so keep that in mind as you're looking at my face throughout the video to really judge whether or not they are similar or not. Moving to the next row, there are two very similar looking contour shades. They are matte. I tend to use them to bronze all over. As you can tell by this one I have hit pan on, they are very soft shadows, so you do tend to blow through them very quickly solely because of that. Although I do tend to use this one mostly all over. I am a little less precise with that because it's just about 2 shades deeper than my natural skin tone, so I use that to really put back some depth into my face, not so much cause definition, but foundation can really flatten your complexion. So just to warm things up, I will go in with this shade and a larger fluffy brush. And frankly, there is a small difference between the two, but these are nearly identical, which is great because obviously it's my most used color and you can't replace individual colors in here. So bonus if you like this first color and find you'll use it a lot, but it's not great in that you're basically getting 2 of the same shades in one palette. If you don't particularly find that these shades suit you, that's 1/3 of your palette gone. And then here on the bottom you have the 2 deepest shades, which actually suit very deep skin tones. One thing I was really impressed with, despite having just 6 pans, this really runs the gamut of skin tones. I have when I'm not tanning, have pretty fair skin, caters to my complexion, as well as pretty much the deepest of the deep. And they're also relatively cool. I wouldn't call them too cool because I personally, my skin can't really handle taupey shades like some people prefer to contour with. This is really middle of the road. I think it's going to flatter a ton of people, and so for those who have typically had problems with bronzers or contour powders coming off as too orange, you're not going to have that problem with this palette. So then I personally, for my skin tone, will take this second deepest shade and put it directly in the hollows of my cheeks with a more precise brush. And I just find that mixing these two together in the order that I do helps that definition becomes a little less harsh. And so I find that's the easiest for coming out with a nice, natural, more gradient bronze and not just super harsh, jagged cheekbones. So that was the IT Cosmetics. Now let's talk about the ULTA palette by comparison. And you can see right off the bat, the ULTA palette is overall larger, pretty much the same width, maybe a little bit thinner, but it's because the pans here are overall larger. Here is a look at the difference between the two. You can see the size difference is pretty significant. The one thing you don't get, however, in the ULTA palette are mirrors. There are 2 mirrors back here. One's a normal mirror and one's a magnification mirror. I personally don't find myself using the magnification mirror all that much. I wish they would have done just a larger normal mirror back here. However, when it came time to apply these powders, I found myself really wanting a mirror, and so I used the one in the IT Cosmetics palette. So if you're a mirror lover, it's one downside, but is it worth paying 20 bucks to get the mirror? Perhaps not. So pan size different aside, you can see there's also a slight color difference here as well. The Ulta shades are a hair warmer, not so much with the deeper shades, but with the mid-tone shades. And at the top, there are actually two shimmery highlights. One is very similar, and it's the one that I'm wearing on the tops of my cheekbones on the other side. Very similar to the pink toned highlight in the IT Cosmetics palette. That one is called the Radiance Highlighter. And then instead of doing that matte powder that the IT Cosmetics palette has, they did what's called a luster highlighter, which is basically a yellow tone or golden highlighter instead. And I'm really happy to say that both of these highlighters are just as finely milled, and the shimmer isn't so much shimmer as it is pearlescence or illumination. It's super finely milled, so people who don't like, you know, chunky highlighter or overwhelming highlighter, you're just gonna get a really nice natural lit from within illumination from these powders, just like you do from the IT Cosmetics palette. Moving the next row down, you can see that this shade here on my right is very similar, if not a little deeper than my favorite shade here in the IT Cosmetics palette. It serves the same purpose for me. In the demo that you're going to see right now, I use it to do the 3 motion, apply color broadly in my temples, right on kind of in the hollows of my cheeks, as well as my jawline. That serves as kind of the base color to reinfuse that depth into my face that my foundation took out. Then there's Golden Bronzer, which is a significantly deeper shade, not at all the kind of duplicate shade that the IT Cosmetics palette offers, which nothing against the Warmth Bronzer, the one I was just describing, but I definitely don't need 2 of them. Despite having the name Golden Bronzer, it's not quite as warm as you might think. It's still going to cater to those who like their contour shades a little cooler or even neutral toned, and yet it's still not quite as deep or cool as Goddess Bronzer down here in the corner. So once again, you really have a nice spectrum of shades that cater to a wide spectrum of skin tones. And I kind of skipped over Bombshell Bronzer, which really lays squarely between the top 2, Warmth and Golden. So you really have a nice pick. I think this has a ton of utility, and I think it creates a very similar contour look as the IT Cosmetics palette. Obviously, the shades aren't identical, but they are very similar. But for all practical purposes, obviously they create a seamless face to where you can't tell the difference between one and the other. The main differences are obviously that you get a gold tone highlighter in the Ulta palette and a little bit more variety when it comes to deeper contour shades in the Ulta palette as well. As far as quality goes, the Ulta palette is definitely comparable to its. The powders are super smooth, ultra fine. You're not gonna encounter any chalkiness because they are, well, the contours at least are all matte. You can sometimes encounter that with cheaper powder products, is that they apply unevenly, they're a little spotty, chalky. Not at all the case with these. I'm really happy to say that a dip in price does not equal a dip in quality. And so then, just to sum everything up, I definitely think that the 2 are interchangeable unless you absolutely love the idea of this matte highlight shade, or you really like the idea of having 2 of these lighter brown shades. I think this can do the trick just as well, but $20 cheaper. So I really hope this video helped you guys out. Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.